Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about another mental health concept because it's one that's, it's probably the most important mental health concept to consider when being a writer or really any kind of creative pursuit or actually really anything at all, to be honest. It's perfectionism. It comes up quite a bit in my practice with my clients. It comes up quite a bit with writers, with any creative types, and really just about anyone. And I'm kind of guilty of it as myself. I think I've got a pretty good handle on it, but it definitely comes up quite a bit with a lot of folks. And perfectionism is probably the most toxic mental health belief system that you can have in your head. Perfectionism is this belief that you must be perfect, that everything you do must be perfect, everything you create must be perfect. It has to be the best it can possibly be, which sounds nice, but it's kind of code for perfect. It's not really just being the best you can do, and I'll kind of get into this. Perfectionism is this false belief, and all beliefs are bullshit. I think I have another video on that one. If I don't, that'll probably be next week's video. But this belief that there is a perfect form out there in the universe, a perfect story, a perfect way to tell your story, a perfect way to be, a perfect way to act, the perfect way to look or to live, all of this stuff. That there's this almost like platonic perfect concept out in the universe, and what you have to do is achieve it. The problem is that the reason why this belief is bullshit is that doesn't exist. There is no real there is nothing that's really perfect. Outside of mathematics, like pure mathematics, you can have a perfect circle in mathematics. It doesn't exist in reality though, and that disconnect, that feeling that you have to be a certain way, but that way doesn't really exist, just that's the reason why it's so toxic, is it just infects every aspect of your life. Perfectionism is the reason why many people stop writing, or more likely never start at all. That's the reason why people struggle with their writing, is because they are convinced that they need to tell this story perfectly, and they will now spend weeks agonizing over a word in a sentence. Should the comma go here or should it not go here? This sort of thing. The perfect way to market your books, the perfect way to make YouTube videos, and because people can't achieve that perfection, because they really don't even know exactly what perfect will look like, they usually just give up after a certain point. Or they go at the other extreme. I tend to see these two extremes because that's what perfectionism drives us to. One is they just give up. They feel overwhelmed by the feeling of failure, the feeling of inadequacy, the feeling that they're not good enough and they'll never be good enough, and they might as well. What they eventually just want to do is just quit and give up. Because who wants to feel like that? Like a constant failure, 100% failure, 100% of the time. No one wants to feel that way. And so these are the people who give up. These are the people who maybe they'll talk about writing a book. Maybe they'll talk about how they would someday like to be a writer, but they're the ones that just kind of shrug and blow it off. And then there's the other end of the spectrum who they desperately want to be perfect, and they feel like they can't give up for whatever reason, for a variety of reasons. And so they just keep going. And they literally start to kill themselves trying to hit this level of perfectionism. By the way, that kind of perfectionism is what drives a lot of eating disorders, for instance, a lot of anxiety disorders. The other side is driven by a lot of depression. And unfortunately, the way people deal with depression and anxiety, especially at these extreme levels, is they have to deal with it in some other way. So we see eating disorders come up, addictions come up quite a bit, addictions of various kinds. They'll drink they'll drink a lot, either to forget about their anxiety or to sort of numb out from their depression and that sort of thing. And so perfectionism is always toxic. Now, what some people think when I tell them that they just need to stop striving to be perfect, what they hear is stop striving to be better. Stop striving to improve yourself. That's not what I'm saying. See, this is that kind of black and white thinking that we get caught up in. Is like, if I'm not striving to be perfect, then I might as well just like give up and be a slob and just fuck off and give up on life and that sort of thing. There's that middle ground, and that middle ground is called good enough, and that's hard for a lot of people to come up with. And it's sometimes hard for me to even nail down, but you for yourself have to decide what is good enough, because that's really all you're ever going to achieve. You're not going to hit perfection. You're going to hit good enough. And it doesn't really matter who you are as far as an artist or anything else. Da Vinci, apparently, the Mona Lisa is not a finished product. He worked on it for, I think, decades. Carried it around with him as he traveled from city to city. I think he was fleeing from wars and plagues and things like that. And he carried this thing around with him while making changes. To him, the Mona Lisa is not a perfect picture. And if we could revive him and bring him back alive today, he'd probably go to the Louvre and start doing little touch-ups, because he would see things that he didn't think were perfect. You can only strive for good enough, and the hard part is you have to define what good enough looks like, and that one is a little bit subjective, but that's where we get in that ambiguity, especially in the creative arts. Like with some of my clients, when it talks about life, other life instances, some people they're looking for the perfect time to have a baby. That's actually come up with a few of my clients. There is no such thing as a perfect time to have a baby. But one of their concerns might be, well, I don't know if I can afford to not work for a little while. When the baby comes, I want to take time off to be there to actually raise for the baby. That's good. That's concern. That's financial. Financial has numbers. So how much money do you need to have saved up to feel comfortable in having a baby? That has a number to it. Because if you say, well, I don't have enough, I need to have more, well, you can always have more. I mean, I think Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. So unless you're Elon Musk, there's always someone out there with more money than you. So how much more? What is that number that you need? Unfortunately, in the creative world, we don't really have a number to do that. It's not usually all that concrete. When I finish a story, I can't tell you, okay, yes, I know this is a good enough story because I have done whatever. I've written 7,000 words. Well, I can write a crappy 7,000 words. So that one I have to internally say that it is good enough. And that is a big part. Again, Dean Wesley Smith talks about this a lot, is this perfectionism drives us to want to rewrite, and then we get stuck because we never write anything new. We actually never even finish anything. We just stay in rewrite mode forever and ever and ever. At a certain point, you have to say, this is good enough, I'm moving on to the next story. I like to think of it as this way, especially as a beginning writer, someone who's just trying to start out. I kind of look at it as did I tell the story the best way I knew how at the time that I was telling the story? Do I feel like I learned a few things, or at least practiced a few things in this story? The answer is yes. Then I just kind of move on. I can't keep rehashing the same story. Personally, I also just get bored. I don't want to look at the same story. I wrote it the first time. I edited it. I probably did some copy edits. I looked at it again when it was in the layout. I'm done. Once by the time I post it up online, I kind of don't want to look at it again. I want to move on to the next thing because I want to learn something new. I want to do something new. So the way to fight perfectionism really is still at its core is internalizing this sense of good enough. This is good enough. I am good enough. Good enough is good enough. That's because that's all I can really shoot for. If you are at one end of perfectionism where you're just not doing anything, then that's where you have to use a lot of self-compassion and pat yourself on the back for any little thing that you do, even if you feel like it wasn't very good, even if you feel like it wasn't perfect or wasn't good enough. Dare to be bad, dare to suck. Everybody sucked at some time. The world's greatest writer, the world's greatest painter or musician, all had crappy days. They all sat at their instrument and couldn't even hold their strings right. Some people, the time that they sucked was so long ago that maybe they don't even remember it. They've been writing or playing or performing for such a long time that they don't really remember a time when they sucked. But there was a time that they sucked too. There was a time that you sucked. There was a time where you struggled reading, The Cat in the Hat. That was too much, for you. The Little Red Hen or some other kindergarten level story. That there was a time where you struggled with that. It just happened such a long time ago, you don't remember it. And so now here you are, maybe an adult, maybe a teenager, and you're trying to write, you're trying to paint, you're trying to perform, and you suck all over again, but you're not used to that because that was something that happened when you were like 4 or 5 or 6 or something else like that. And now here you are in your teens, 20s, 30s, 50s, like in my case. And so being okay with just not being very good and just knowing that eventually you'll get there if you keep practicing. And that's where you have to pat yourself on the back for any little thing that you do, because anything is better than 0, which is probably where you're at if you're on this end of the spectrum. If you're on the other end of the spectrum where you're just killing yourself to try and be perfect and you keep rewriting the same thing, you've been working on the same novel for the past 5 years because you just keep rewriting and rewriting and rewriting, that's where you need to internalize that the concept of being good enough and just putting it out there and just see what happens. Again, it's that same sort of dare to be bad, dare to suck, but at a certain point, you're not ever going to hit perfection, and you just at a certain point just need to acknowledge that that's going to happen, and your story is just going to be what it is, and some people are going to love it and some people are going to hate it, and that's okay. In my mind, that's a good piece of art, is something that is very personal, that comes from the artist, that some people are going to really like and some people aren't really going to like, just based on tastes more than anything else, and at a certain point just to let it go. I think again, Dean Wesley Smith talks about that really your only real job as a writer is to be clear. If you're unclear in your story, meaning like I don't really know what's going on or who's doing what or who said what or what kind of room they're in or what's the setting, then that's bad writing. Beyond that, it doesn't matter. If I can read your story and I know who's saying what and who's doing what and where this is going on, I can kind of generate an image in my head, well then that's good storytelling. Whether I like the story or not has nothing to do with it. But anyway, in the comments, talk about perfectionism. Do you struggle with it? Does it hit you? How has perfectionism affected your life? How have you gotten past it? If you used to struggle with perfectionism, but now you're past it, like what helped you? What helped? Because we're all in this together. Like I said, perfectionism is one of those concepts that comes up, if not daily, certainly weekly with my clients. I have a couple of clients. That's mainly what we're working on, is their perfectionism. But it comes up quite a bit in other aspects of life. But anyway, I have just posted a whole bunch of short stories on really everywhere: Amazon, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, Apple. I posted a lot of my Yark the Scholar stories. Some of them are older ones from the free book that's now gone. I kind of said that was going to be going. Now it's gone. But I posted a lot of those short stories. They're now up for sale in a lot of different areas. Also got some new stories, some new Yark the Scholar stories. Got a couple of new other stories of different characters, some funny, some dark fantasy. So anyway, check out the links in the description because they're going to be different now, because I'm going to have links to some of those other stories. And I will talk to you later. Bye.